Stray dog blocks. A school bus. What the driver discovers is unexpected. It was an ordinary morning in the quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across the narrow streets lined with sleepy houses. Children in brightly colored backpacks were waiting at bus stops, chatting and laughing, while parents stood nearby, sipping coffee and stealing quick glances at their phones. The hum of the school bus echoed in the distance, a familiar sound, signaling the start of another routine day. But as the yellow bus rounded a bend and approached Maple Avenue, something unusual happened. A stray dog, a scruffy, medium-sized mutt with matted fur and piercing amber eyes, darted into the middle of the road. The driver, Mr. Harris, slammed on the brakes, bringing the bus to a sudden halt. The children inside gasped, their morning chatter replaced by an anxious silence. The dog didn't budge. It stood firm, staring at the bus with an intensity that was both unsettling and captivating. Mr. Harris, a kind-hearted man with a weathered face and years of experience behind the wheel, stepped out of the bus. He waved his hands, trying to shoo the dog away. "Go on, boy. Get out of the road," he called, his voice echoing in the stillness. But the dog didn't move. Instead, it barked, once, sharply, as if trying to communicate. Then it turned its head and looked back toward the edge of the woods that bordered the street. Its behavior was strange, almost deliberate, and it sent a ripple of unease through Mr. Harris. He glanced back at the children, some of whom had pressed, their faces against the windows, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. "What's wrong with it?" one child whispered to another. "It's just a dog," said another, though their voice wavered with uncertainty. Mr. Harris sighed, muttering under his breath, "What's gotten into this mutt?" He approached the dog cautiously, his boots crunching on the gravel. As he drew nearer, the dog let out another bark, this time stepping back a few paces before stopping again. It was as if it wanted Mr. Harris to follow. And then came the sound, a faint, muffled cry carried by the wind. Mr. Harris froze. The cry came again, this time louder, more distinct. It was the sound of a child calling for help. "Did you hear that?" Mr. Harris called back to the bus, his voice tinged with alarm. The children nodded, their faces pale with worry. The dog barked once more and turned, heading toward the woods. It stopped at the edge of the trees, looking back at Mr. Harris with an expression that seemed to say, "Follow me." Heart-pounding, Mr. Harris hesitated only a moment before stepping off the road and into the woods, the dog leading the way. Behind him, the children pressed their faces harder against the windows, their curiosity mixed with a growing sense of dread. What lay ahead was anyone's guess. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a stray dog. It was trying to lead them to something or someone. And whatever that was, Mr. Harris couldn't shake the feeling that it would change everything. What was the dog trying to reveal, and who was crying for help in the woods? Stay tuned as this heart-pounding mystery unfolds. Mr. Harris pushed past the thick underbrush, his heart thudding with each step. The woods felt colder than they should have on a bright morning, the air heavy with an unsettling silence. Behind him, the faint murmur of the children on the bus faded into the distance. All he could hear now was the crunch of leaves beneath his boots and the low, persistent barks of the stray dog leading him deeper into the forest. The dog stopped abruptly, turning back to ensure Mr. Harris was still following. Its amber eyes seemed to hold an urgency that sent shivers down his spine. "All right, boy," Mr. Harris muttered, his voice low. "Show me what you're trying to tell me." The cries for help grew louder as they ventured further into the woods. It wasn't just a child's voice. It was desperate, filled with fear. "Help me! Somebody, please!" Mr. Harris quickened his pace, the adrenaline kicking in. He scanned the dense foliage, his breath clouding in the cool air. The dog barked again, sharper this time, and veered toward a fallen tree. Mr. Harris followed, pushing aside branches that clawed at his jacket. And then he saw it, a small shoe sticking out from beneath the tangled roots of the tree. His stomach tightened as he dropped to his knees. "Hello? Can you hear me?" he called out, his voice steady despite the panic bubbling inside. "Yes," came the reply, faint but clear. "I'm here. Please help." Mr. Harris began to dig frantically, his hands pulling away damp leaves and dirt. The dog was right beside him, using its paws to claw at the ground, its growls of effort echoing in the eerie stillness. After a few tense moments, a small, pale face emerged, tears streaking the cheeks of a boy no older than 7. "Don't worry, kid, I've got you," Mr. Harris said gently, his voice breaking with relief. The boy was trapped, his leg pinned under the heavy tree. His clothes were torn and he was shivering, his lips tinged with blue. The dog nudged the boy's arm with its nose, whining softly as if to reassure him. "It's okay, buddy," Mr. Harris said, patting the dog's head. "You've done good. Can." "You get me out?" the boy whimpered, his voice trembling. "I will, but I need you to stay very still," Mr. Harris replied. He pulled out his phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Swallowing his frustration, he glanced back toward the road, realizing they were deeper in the woods than he'd thought. "All right," he muttered to himself. "I'll have to move this on my own." He tried lifting the fallen tree, his muscles straining against its weight, but it barely budged. The boy cried out in pain, and Mr. Harris immediately stopped. "I'm sorry, kid. Hang on. I'll figure something out." The dog barked again, pacing anxiously around the area. Then it darted, off into the trees. "Where are you going now?" Mr. Harris muttered, watching the dog disappear. Moments later, the dog returned, dragging a long branch in its jaws. Mr. Harris blinked in disbelief. "Well, I'll be," he said with a shaky laugh. "You're smarter than you look, aren't you?" Using the branch as a lever, Mr. Harris wedged it under the tree. With every ounce of strength he had, he pushed down, gritting his teeth as the heavy trunk shifted just enough to free the boy's leg. The child whimpered in pain, but managed to pull himself free. "There you go. You're safe now," Mr. Harris said, scooping the boy into his arms. The dog barked triumphantly, circling them like a hero in its own right. "Thank you," the boy whispered, clinging to Mr. Harris's jacket. As they made their way back toward the bus, Mr. Harris couldn't help but wonder how long the boy had been trapped there, and how the stray dog had known to alert him. The mystery gnawed at him, but there was no time to dwell on it. When they reached the edge of the woods, the children on the bus erupted in cheers, their faces pressed against the windows. Some clapped, while others wiped away tears of relief. Mr. Harris carried the boy onto the bus and laid him gently across the back seat. The dog followed, leaping up and settling next to the boy as if it belonged there. "Where did you come from?" Mr. Harris asked the boy, who was now wrapped in a jacket borrowed from one of the older students. "I got lost," the boy explained between sniffles. "I was walking to school with my brother, and we were playing a game. I ran into the woods, but I couldn't find my way back. Then the tree fell and I couldn't move." Mr. Harris nodded, his heart heavy with the thought of what might have happened if the dog hadn't intervened. "You're lucky this little guy found you," he said, scratching the dog behind its ears. The dog wagged its tail, its eyes glinting, with a mix of pride and exhaustion. As the bus rolled away from the woods, Mr. Harris glanced in the rearview mirror. The children were quieter than usual, their expressions solemn as they processed what had just happened. The stray dog, however, seemed completely at ease, its head resting on the boy's lap. And yet a lingering question hung in the air. How had the dog known? Was it a coincidence or something more? What had drawn the stray dog to the boy? And could there be more to its story? Stay tuned as the mystery deepens. The school bus pulled into the parking lot, its usual hum overshadowed by the buzz of chatter. News of the stray dog's heroic actions had spread among the children, and as they disembarked, teachers and staff gathered to greet them. Among them was Ms. Carter, the school nurse, who rushed forward to tend to the injured boy. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she asked, her kind eyes scanning his face. "I'm okay," the boy replied with a small, tired smile. "The dog saved me." The stray, still by his side, wagged its tail and nudged the boy gently. Mr. Harris quickly explained what had happened, emphasizing the dog's pivotal role in finding and rescuing the child. Ms. Carter nodded, her expression shifting from concern to amazement. As the boy was carried into the nurse's office for further care, the dog hesitated at the door, unsure if it was allowed to follow. "Let him in," Ms. Carter said with a smile. "He's earned it." The dog trotted in confidently, curling up beside the boy's cot as if it had always belonged there. But as the staff tended to the boy, Mr. Harris couldn't shake the feeling that the dog's actions weren't just heroic, they were intentional. Something strange about this, he muttered to himself, leaning against the doorway. Just then, the boy's parents arrived, their faces pale with worry. They embraced their son tightly, tears streaming down their cheeks as they thanked everyone involved. "You saved our boy," the father said, his voice shaking as he turned to Mr. Harris. "It wasn't me," Mr. Harris replied, glancing at the dog. "It was him." The parents looked at the dog with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "Where did he come from?" the mother asked. "That's the million-dollar question," Mr. Harris said, scratching his head. But as he spoke, the dog perked up, its ears twitching at a distant sound. It let out a low whine and bolted out of the nurse's office, startling everyone. "Where's he going now?" Mr. Harris exclaimed, running after it. The dog led him back to the bus and then darted down the street, heading toward the woods once more. Mr. Harris hesitated briefly before following, his heart pounding as he sprinted to keep up. The dog stopped at a small clearing, barking furiously at something hidden beneath a pile of leaves. When Mr. Harris caught up, he saw a weathered metal tag attached to a broken collar. The tag was engraved with a name, Max. "Max," Mr. Harris murmured, kneeling to pick up the collar. The dog whimpered and nudged his arm, its amber eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and urgency. "What's this all about?" Mr. Harris wondered aloud, staring at the tag. He noticed a faint engraving on the back, "Property of the Allen family." The name jolted something in his memory. The Allen family had lived in the area years ago, but had moved away after a tragic accident. Their young son, Eric, had gone missing while playing in the woods, and their dog, named Max, had disappeared on the same day. Despite exhaustive searches, neither had ever been found. "Wait a minute," Mr. Harris whispered, his voice trembling. "You're that Max, aren't you?" The dog barked once, as if in confirmation, and began digging at the ground again. Mr. Harris knelt beside him, his hands trembling as he helped uncover the earth. What they found sent chills down his spine, a small rusted box containing faded photographs and a child's drawing of a boy with his dog. "Eric and Max, Mr. Harris murmured, his throat tightening. The drawing was signed in a child's scrawl, "Best friends forever." Tears welled in his eyes as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Max had stayed in the woods all these years, searching for Eric, or perhaps waiting for someone to find him. And today, when the boy was trapped under the tree, Max had seen an echo of the past and acted to save him. But there was one more question. What had happened to Eric? As if reading his thoughts, Max barked again and started leading Mr. Harris further into the woods. This time the trail ended at a small, unmarked grave nestled among the trees. A makeshift cross stood at its head, weathered and overgrown with moss. Mr. Harris's breath caught in his throat. "Oh, Max," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You've been watching over him all this time, haven't you?" The dog sat beside the grave, its head bowed as if in mourning. Tears streamed down Mr. Harris's face as he reached out to stroke Max's fur. "You're a good boy, Max," he said softly. "The best boy." When he returned to the school, clutching the photographs and the collar, he shared the story with the boy's parents, the staff, and the students. The tale of Max, the loyal dog who had never given up on his best friend, left everyone in stunned silence. How had Max survived all these years alone in the woods? And how did he know to save the boy? The mystery of his devotion was both haunting and beautiful. As the day ended, one thing was clear. Max wasn't just a stray dog. He was a guardian, a hero, and a reminder of the unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the schoolyard as the day wound down. The children gathered around Max, their voices filled with awe as they recounted the dog's bravery. The once mysterious stray now had a name, a history, and a place in everyone's hearts. The boy, now fully recovered, sat cross-legged in the grass with Max by his side. He gently scratched behind the dog's ears, whispering words of gratitude. "You're my hero, Max," he said with a shy smile. Max leaned into his touch, his tail wagging softly. Mr. Harris watched the scene unfold from a distance, his heart full of emotions he couldn't quite put into words. The discovery in the woods and Max's unwavering loyalty had left a profound impact on him. It was a reminder of the incredible resilience and love that animals could offer, even in the face of loss and tragedy. The boy's parents approached Mr. Harris, their gratitude shining in their eyes. "We've decided to adopt Max," the father said, his voice firm yet emotional. "After everything he's done, he deserves a loving home." "That's wonderful," Mr. Harris replied, his voice tinged with relief. "He's earned it." As the family prepared to take Max home, the dog hesitated, glancing back toward the woods. For a brief moment, it seemed as though he was saying a silent goodbye to the place where he had spent so many years. But when the boy called his name, Max turned and trotted over, his tail wagging with new purpose. The following week, the school held a special assembly to honor Max's bravery. The children created artwork and wrote stories about him, turning the once stray dog into a local legend. Max, now a beloved member of the boys' family, attended the assembly with a shiny new collar and a relaxed demeanor. He was no longer the wary, weathered stray who had blocked the school bus that fateful day. Instead, he stood tall and proud, basking in the affection of the children who surrounded him. As the principal gave a heartfelt speech, Mr. Harris couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary series of events. The mysterious stray dog had not only saved a life, but had also brought a community together. In the end, Max's story wasn't just about heroism. It was about love, loyalty, and the connections that transcend time. His journey from a lonely guardian in the woods to a cherished family pet was a testament to the unyielding power of devotion. As the assembly ended, the boy hugged Max tightly, whispering, "You'll never have to be alone again." Max looked up at him, his amber eyes shining with trust and contentment, and in that moment, under the golden rays of the setting sun, it was clear. Max had found his forever home. What do you think of Max's incredible story? Do you believe animals have a sixth sense when it comes to helping humans? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one.